theyeshiva.net.
Thank you, everybody. I am thrilled to be here with all of the centers of Chabad of the Gulf Coast in Florida in tribute to the 26th yartzeit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, in an evening dedicated to the theme of love, positivity, happiness, the Rebbe's outlook for a more meaningful, upbeat, happy, joyous, and inspired life. First of all, I want to thank all of the incredible leaders of the Chabad centers of Florida's Gulf Coast, the Rebbitzins and the rabbis, unsung heroes of the Jewish people, dedicated day in and day out to build bridges in the Jewish community, to reach out, to kindle sparks, to embrace souls in their inimitable, non-judgmental way. They have created so many amazing bridges and connections, have allowed so many young and old men, women, and children of the Jewish people, affiliated and unaffiliated, from all different types of persuasions and backgrounds and walks of life, to find a comfortable place within the Jewish community and to really find their own space in the unbreakable chain of Jewish existence and Jewish life that begins with Abraham and is already going on for close to 4,000 years. So thank you. I think I speak on behalf of all of the hundreds of Jews gathered here this evening from all the different parts and communities of the Gulf Coast. I think I speak on behalf of all of you, on behalf of all of us, when I begin by expressing profound gratitude to these extraordinary heroes of the Jewish people, dedicated with sacrifice and complete dedication and love to be able to unite our people, inspire our people, perpetuate and create a living continuity of Jewish life and of Jewish celebration. God bless all of you, ambassadors of the Rebbe to the Gulf Coast. And I want to thank all of you, all of the communities who have gathered here, all of the women and men, young and old, who are here with us this evening. Thank you for being the people who you are, creating such beautiful communities saturated with camaraderie, with loyalty, with love and trust. And thank you, everybody, for coming out, in quotation marks, this evening. Usually, when a rabbi speaks for too long, so it's a problem because some people are very respectful. They don't want to insult the speaker. And they don't want to get up and leave. You know, it's not comfortable. But this is one of the great advantages of quarantine and of the Zoom technology. If the rabbi gets boring or monotonous or repetitive or too long, no problem. You stop the video, you keep the video running, whatever you want, and you're free, you're emancipated to go. So this is one of the great advantages of the Zoom technology. Maybe that's one way of introducing love, positivity, and happiness. So let me begin with this anecdote. You know, they say that anxiety and worrying is like a rocking chair. It keeps you busy, but it gets you nowhere. So there's this good joke about a Jew who was terribly, terribly anxious. His anxiety knew no bounds, and his entire corporation, his entire business knew how anxious he is. He was the boss, and he would literally infect everybody with his anxiety. And all the employees suffered from it. He was the ultimate worrier. He never ceased to worry. Let's call this man Yankel. One day he comes to work and he looks calm. And his friend says, Yankel, what made you so calm? He says, I saw an ad in the newspaper that you can hire a worrier to worry for you. You pay him a salary and he worries about everything in the company. So I hired a fellow, and they say he's an expert. It's a great resume. He's been doing this for decades. And he is now an official part of our company, so I could stop worrying. He's going to do the worrying for me. His friend says, Yankel, how much are you paying him? What type of salary does this guy take? He says, the first year it's $140,000. He says, Yankel, are you mad? We're about to go bankrupt. You can't even cover the regular payroll of your regular employees. Where in the world are you going to come up with $140,000 to pay this guy to worry? I don't understand what you're thinking. He says, well, that is his first worry. We all know that anxiety is a very much part of our life. For some of us more, for some of us less. For some people it's debilitating. And for some people it's just a nuisance. But we live in an era where there is tremendous anxiety. People are stressed, people are overwhelmed, people are unhappy. And even if our physical circumstances and conditions are way better than what our grandparents or great-grandparents can even dream of, and despite the challenges that we all have, and despite the uncertainty of the future, and despite the economic challenges that everybody has recently encountered, and notwithstanding the devastating death toll of the pandemic of coronavirus, COVID-19, and the challenges of quarantine and isolation, and the challenges of illness that struck so many people, and all of us, including myself and many of the rabbis and many of you, have personal relatives, parents, grandparents, siblings, cousins, good friends, mentors, neighbors, teachers, who have lost their life during this terrible pandemic. And our heart goes out to all of them, and we offer our deepest condolences and blessings of solace and comfort to all who were affected in one way or another by the illness, or even by losses in the family or in the community. These are real challenges that everybody faces. And even if you can't compare them to some of the challenges of 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, that's true. But nonetheless, there is real anxiety in people's lives, and it's very hard for many of us to get rid of it. There's anxiety in our personal relationships, often in our marriages, our relationships with our children, our relationships with our parents, with our siblings. Anxiety in terms of our financial realities, anxiety in terms of psychology, mental health, social anxiety, physical anxiety, emotional anxiety, spiritual anxiety, financial anxiety, spiritual, all types of anxiety. And the fact remains that people deep inside are struggling, at least many, many people. Different people, it's manifested so many different ways. But this is a common theme that I encounter with people all over the world. Pre-corona, I was traveling all over the place, and this was probably one of the most important and relevant themes that people want to hear, because it affects all of us, and it's not always dependent on the practical circumstances. Somebody walks into your house or looks at your life from an external point of view, everything looks good. But sometimes we know that the debilitating effects of anxiety sit deep, deep down in trauma, in our bodies, in our fiber, in our nerves, in our psyches, and they paralyze us. Some of us are conscious of it, some of us are not conscious of it. Some of us are emancipated from it. And tonight I want to focus on this and really present a few tips from the Weltanschauung, the world perspective of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Over the years of his leadership, he spoke a lot and he wrote a lot about happiness, positivity, joy, being upbeat, optimistic, living a life of confidence, of serenity, of tranquility. This was a very important theme in the Rebbe's writings, in the Rebbe's communication, in the Rebbe's teachings. I had the privilege many years to serve on the team of oral scribes of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Actually, it wasn't so many years. It was the last years of the Rebbe's life. I was a yeshiva student. And the idea of simcha, joy, positivity, was a never-ending theme in the words of the Rebbe. The Rebbe once wrote to somebody. He said, I don't remember the words verbatim, he wrote it in Hebrew, but I'm giving you the concept. The Rebbe once wrote to somebody that, for me in life, simcha, people who are close to me, I want them to be in a state of joy. And when they're in a state of joy, it impacts me. And the opposite is also understandable. The Rebbe really felt so strongly that joy is not just a luxury. Joy is actually a moral obligation. for two reasons. When we are in a positive place, we affect everybody around us. When we're miserable, we affect everybody around us. And number two, when you're in a happy place, your decisions are going to be much more virtuous, much healthier, much more productive. Happiness and joy and a positive attitude is the prerequisite to be able to win the so many moral battles that each and every one of us have to face every day in life. We all know this. When I'm in a good mood, when I'm spirited, when I have an optimistic, positive outlook on life, it's easier for me to exercise. It's easier for me to eat healthy foods and stay away from toxic foods. It's easier for me to build my relationships with my spouse, with my children, with myself, with my loved ones, with my God. It's easier for me to engage in mitzvahs and kindness and positive deeds. All in all, it's much easier for me to win the daily battles of life. The Tanya says in chapter 26, and this was written in the 1700s, the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad, writes in Tanya, and he says, learn from martial arts. I always found it interesting that a Hasidic rabbi from Belarus in the 1700s uses martial arts as a metaphor for life. And he says, in martial arts, victory is usually reserved not for the person who's stronger. Of course, strength matters, but victory is reserved for the person who's in a better state of mind, the person who's more joyous and therefore more agile. He says, when you're melancholy and heavy and lethargic and depressed and sad, even if you're more powerful and more muscular, you will lose the battle. And the same is true in the battle of life. Victory is not reserved for the muscle man as much as it is reserved for the person whose muscles are infused with adrenaline, with joyousness, with positive energy. And that's why it's so befitting that in tribute of the Rebbe's yartzeit, we focus on this topic of living this life of love and positivity and happiness. There was a chassid, a Chabad chassid, a disciple of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Yitzchok Golden, Itcha Golden. He was a principal of a girls' school in Brooklyn. Very precious and special man. And when the Lubavitcher Rebbe became Rebbe, he succeeded his father-in-law in 1950 and became the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe. He wrote a letter. This Rabbi Itcha Golden wrote a letter to an old-time friend of his from the yet Russia, a Jew who was living in Melbourne, Australia by the name of Reb Zalman Sabransky. And he described the new Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneers, and he wanted to describe his personality the way he observed it. And he wrote about the Rebbe in Yiddish, a few words, and I'm going to tell you these words. He said, Mekuktafem, you look at him, umezet afrelecher zu brochener ish eloki. You see a happy and broken man of God. And when I saw it the first time, it startled me. What a definition of a person. A happy, broken man of God. And interestingly, years later, they once interviewed Professor Elie Wiesel, the late Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner, famous Holocaust survivor who just died a few years ago. And Professor Wiesel was interviewed about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said almost similar words. In his own inimitable way, he said that the first time he came to a Fabrengen, he came to a public gathering of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 770 Eastern Parkway. He said, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but just the theme of his words, the way I recall them from his interview a few years ago. He said, I walked into 770, which is the main sanctuary, the main synagogue where the Rebbe prayed and studied and taught and worked. And he said, and the Rebbe was sitting at the platform, at his chair, at the dais, and communicating, speaking to all of his students, his chassidim, his disciples, his pupils, all of the guests. And he said, and I looked at his face, and I saw on his face that he carried the bruises and the scars and the wounds of all of Jewish history. I saw all of Jewish history on the streaks of his face and countenance as he was talking. And I knew that this is the place to be. And I came back, as he said, and back, and yet back again. And it was true. This was a brilliant and accurate description. I had the privilege of standing for many, many years at the feet of the Lubavitcher Rebbe at almost every single one of his public gatherings and addresses during the 1980s and early 90s, until the Rebbe fell ill in 92 and then passed 2 years later. And I can always see, even though I was very young and didn't understand, I still don't understand much, but then I understood even less. Looking at the Rebbe's face, you could see in his face the story of the Jewish people, in its complexities, in its tragedies, in its deep sadness, but also in its profound resilience, hope, triumph, and incessant conviction that we are on a march towards redemption. And this is what Rabbi YY Jacobson wrote to his friend in Melbourne. You could see a happy and broken man of God. Because real happiness does not mean you live in La La Land. You maybe smoke up something and the substance alters my consciousness. I'm a high, I'm in La La Land. But then when I wake up tomorrow morning and I sober up, I'm still stuck in the quagmire of my life, which is why Judaism was never enthusiastic about using external substances as a source of stimuli to stimulate my joy and happiness. Because anything that's not coming from within ultimately is going to be temporary, and therefore it's going to be disappointing because it will not create an authentic change. When Judaism speaks of positivity, joy, happiness, being upbeat, it's always about an internal work and internal development. So yes, there is a happiness where I can escape. And you know what? Sometimes it's good to get to a different scenery and go to a different environment. Obviously, coronavirus created some limitations, and create external circumstances that put you in a different mood, whether it's traveling, whether it's meeting new people, going to new places, having some excitement in your life. That's great, fun, but you always have to distinguish between external stimulations that take you away from your environment and a joy that is really internal. So joy in Judaism is not about living in a naive world in La La Land and everything is perfect and wonderful and ignorance is blissful. But rather, real joy and wholesomeness is the joy and wholesomeness that comes in the midst of really having a real relationship with life. Of course, many of us detach from life because of the pain. But detachment is not the solution, because detachment causes a deeper pain. Can I really be attached to life? Can I be connected to people? Can I be connected to the realities of life and still maintain joy? This is what this chassid meant when he said, I see a broken and happy man of God. Of course, you can live in La La Land or be naive and be in an upbeat mood. But there's a person who can experience the brokenness of the world. And I can experience the brokenness in myself. And I can have compassion for the difficulties and the challenges that I face or people around me face. And yet, I can maintain a sense of positivity and joy. And that synthesis, that integration, is really one of the great, great ideas that I learned from the Rebbe. I want to share with you an extraordinary Hasidic interpretation. As you know, the Hasidic masters, one of their most powerful, pervasive themes was joy. Beginning with the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, who passed away on Shavuot 1760, he and his students and disciples emphasized joy as pivotal, as central to the life of the Jew. And this was no simple feat. Of course, it says in Psalms, serve God with joy. It says in Deuteronomy, God is upset that you don't live a life of joy. Maimonides writes in the Laws of Lulav that a central theme of Jewish life is a person celebrating their service of God and doing mitzvahs. But these are, you would say, isolated sources that speak of joy. The Baal Shem Tov and his students took joy and they took it from the peripheral of religious life and really turned it into a central theme and facet in the celebration of Jewish life. Joy was not just a nice thing or a cute thing, but your attitude to life in a positive way, they saw as one of the key features of what it means to be a Jew. And one of the great Hasidic masters, his name was Rabbi Aaron of Karlin, captured it in a very beautiful interpretation that I want to share with you. Every morning and evening, Jews have a mitzvah, we say the Shema. And the Shema opens up with that famous verse from Deuteronomy, V'ahavta es Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha. You remember from your Chabad houses pre-corona, right? V'ahavta es Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha. You should love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your money, or with all your might. So Rashi, the great biblical commentator, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, the 11th century French biblical commentator, says, what does it mean to love God with all your heart? What does it mean with all your heart? Not with a half a heart, not with a quarter of a heart, not with 90% of my heart? So Rashi quotes the sages who say, and I quote in Hebrew and I'll translate, Shelo yehi libcha choluk al hamokeh. Your heart should not be in a fight with God, which is a lovely interpretation. They acknowledge the fact that in life it's very easy to get into a fight with God. He says, can your heart make peace with God? But the interesting idea here is that the name for God is a very unusual name, Hamakom, which means the place, the space. God has many names in the Hebrew Bible and in the Midrash and in the Talmud. Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shechina, Elokim, Adna. Hamakom is also one of the terms we use for God, the space, because he fills the space of the world. The space of the world is really divine. Here, this is the key phrase that we use for God. Your heart should not be in a fight with the makom, with the space. So the great Reb Aaron of Karlin said that the sages were intimating here a very profound idea about life. What does it mean to love God with all your heart? Your heart should not have a fight with the space. Which space? The space that you are presently in. So many of us argue with the space that we are in, geographically or mentally. I often tell myself, if only I could be somewhere else. If only I could live somewhere else. If only I can get out of this place and go to another place, geographically or mentally. If only I could be in another place. If only I would have grown up in a different home, grown up in a different type of family, grown up in a different type of environment, experience a different type of marriage, experience a different type of vocation, have different talents, resources. If only I did not have to deal with the present space that I am in, physically, mentally, psychologically, biologically, financially, emotionally, and spiritually, life would be so much happier and so much better. Comes the Torah and says, Shelo yehi libcha chaluk al hamakom. You must reach a mature awareness in life to make peace with the space that you are in. It does not mean I should not strive to move to another space. I should not strive to get the best job I can, to develop the best marriage I can, to have the most successful life I can, the most comfortable life I can, to live in the right place for me where I maximize my potentials. Of course, a person should try to be in the best space possible. But what I have to know is that the space I am in right now constitutes not a tragedy, but a mission. I am here because the creator of the world who conceived me and you in love has placed me here right now, right here with these circumstances to serve as an ambassador of the divine, an ambassador of love, light, hope, healing, wisdom, truth, transformation, and redemption. To be able to accomplish what only my soul can accomplish right here and right now. Do you remember Amadeus, friends? Amadeus has an incredible scene. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is conducting one of his classic symphonies, and who attends? The Austrian emperor, Emperor Joseph II. And Emperor Joseph II was somewhat tone deaf. What do tone deaf people do during symphonies? It's what Jews do during rabbis' sermons. Present company, of course, excluded. I know that when your rabbis give sermons, you are absolutely attentive. The Gulf Coast of Florida is the best. But in some other communities, including in my neck of the woods called New York, people fall asleep during rabbi sermons. Emperor Joseph II from Austria falls asleep during Mozart's symphony. Mozart finishes, and he walks by the emperor, And the emperor thanks him, and Mozart expresses gratitude to the emperor for coming. And the emperor tells him, Mr. Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, job well done, but too many notes. Too many notes. What do you tell somebody who does not get it? What do you tell them? That you are the last person who has the right to critique my symphonies? You know, you can come out with a head shorter. So Mozart responds to His Majesty and says, yes, Your Majesty, I understand. Now tell me, which notes do you suppose I cut? Because, of course, a great composer knows that every note is indispensable to the symphony. And this is the metaphor Jewish spirituality uses for people, for souls. Every single soul is an indispensable note in God's cosmic symphony. Which note do you suppose the divine creator should cut? It's not just every soul is a note. It's the location where the soul is. Not just geographical location, but also spiritual and mental location. So the fact that I am here right now, I am quarantined in Rockland County, Muncie, New York, geographically, or you are wherever you are present right now watching this Zoom wonderful evening together in Fabring. Wherever I am mentally, I, with my challenges and blessings, with my virtues and vices, with all of the vicissitudes and fluctuations in my life, I, with the struggles I have to face, and with the resources I face, you, in the space that you are in right now, this is not a mistake. It's not a tragedy. It's not, oi, I am a victim. No. In yeshivish language, we say it's not a b'di'evet, it's a lechatchila. You are an ambassador. You were sent here. Lo yeh libcha cholok al hamakom. Don't fight with the space. Now, maybe tomorrow, I have to try to move on. Maybe tomorrow I have to try to change things. Every person ought to maximize their situation and live the best and most productive life possible. But don't run away from the opportunity and from the mission that was given to you right now, right here in this very space. This is the first prerequisite for developing an attitude that is so much more optimistic, that is so much more positive. This doesn't mean that it's not painful. Sometimes I'm in a space where I have to face painful realities. I have to deal with painful realities. There are tears. There is anguish. There is turmoil. There is difficulty. But when I stop fighting with my space, when I stop dedicating energy to the sense of guilt and victimhood, and regret and remorse about what a loser I am, or the curses that befell me because I'm in this space, I can actually use that energy for something far more constructive. And that is discover the silver lining and seize the moment and seize the opportunity to fulfill the mission that God wants me to fulfill right now. This is the purpose-driven life, asking every moment, what is my mission right here, right now? What is my calling? What is my purpose? Real joy comes from knowing that wherever I am, I have the ability to do the right thing. I am in the right place and I'm in the right time, and I can make a choice to do the right thing. Would have it been nice if the circumstances would have been different and the set of choices I have now would have been different? Of course, maybe it would have been nice. And there is room for compassion. You can feel compassion. But don't become a victim. Don't feel like a loser. Don't fight with your space. Don't feel guilty over your space. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, shelo yehei libcha chaluk al hamakom. There's a famous expression, I don't know if it's so nice to quote him at a Jewish lecture, but I will anyway, because it's attributed to Henry Ford. Henry Ford. And I guess what gives me a justification to quote him is, a little while ago before Corona, I was at a dinner of a wonderful, great Torah institution, a school in Detroit, Beis Yehuda School. And the director of the dinner, Gary Turgo, was telling me how just a few years ago, the place for the dinner was in the headquarters of Ford. And he said as he was there entering into the dinner, honoring Torah, he was thinking to himself what Henry Ford would say if he observed this site, that the headquarters of Ford are now being used as a place where they're honoring the study of Torah and the perpetuation of Jewish education. So they attribute to Henry Ford the following quote, and that is, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are probably right. If you believe you can't, you're probably right. And if you believe you can, you are probably right. And the truth is, this is the most basic explanation for that marvelous and disturbing story in this week's Torah portion in Shlach. Moses chooses 12 skilled, spiritual giants, leaders of the Jewish people, and he dispatches them on a mission to go survey the land of Canaan, to be spies and come back and help the Jews prepare to the conquest and settlement of their promised eternal homeland, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. And yet they come back not only demoralized, but depressed with dread and fear, filling their psyche to the point that they inculcate the entire Jewish people with this dread and terror and fear, and they dissuade the entire nation from entering into the land. And the commentators struggle. How does such a transformation happen? And why was it that two of these spies indeed remained optimistic and confident? What was the difference between the two? The difference, of course, was that the fear of the 10 spies indeed became a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. They started to believe that they can't. And you know what happens when you believe you can't? You can't. The Rebbe once said that when God said that the Jews will remain 40 years in the desert, it wasn't a punishment. It was a consequence. If you believe that you can't, you really can't. I can't take you into the land. You will sabotage your own mission because you don't believe in your resources and your ability. You don't believe that you're a divine ambassador. But if you believe you can, then indeed you can. It's this great anecdote I once heard. There was this fellow who was so pessimistic. He was always waiting for doomsday and preparing for doomsday. He always told his wife and children, I am cursed. I have terrible luck. My life is just a bad, cursed life. This was his motto. My life is a bad life. You know, the chatter in people's brains that doesn't stop, that chatter always has to be looked at, because sometimes unconsciously we don't stop chattering and talking to ourselves in our brain about how horrible everything is, and it could be so deep. Anyway, this was one of the characters who lived with that type of negative consciousness. His job, his vocation in life was he would load up trains that traveled on intercontinental journeys with foods to different states, and sometimes a different country, America to Canada, and he would load these trains. This is what he did for a living. Anyway, one day there was a train. It was supposed to travel for some 30, 40 hours to Vancouver, and he comes to the train and he loads it with a lot of food that is dairy food. It was supposed to be a refrigerated train. So he loads large quantities of butter and of milk and of yogurt and of cream cheese and of ice cream. And he loads this train, which is going to take this 30, 40 hour journey to Vancouver. It's supposed to have a good refrigerating system so all these foods remain intact and fresh. And he finishes loading and he's about to leave the train. Lo and behold, the conductor didn't realize what's going on. The door is closed and the train starts moving. He's banging on the door, but nobody can hear him. The commotion is too loud. The train has already left. Of course, he takes out his cell phone. The cell phone died. So now he's stuck in this train for a 40-hour journey in a supposed refrigerator. How do you survive? So he finds a piece of cardboard and a pen, and he writes his final will, last will and testament to his wife and children. And this is how it is. This is how it begins. I always knew that something like this would happen to me. I would get locked up in a refrigerator for 40 hours and suffer such a horrific and painful death. And he goes on to write his final will. What a miserable life he had. He never had a day of peace, never a day of tranquility. And now finally, all his savage suffering will come to an end with this miserable death. He sends them some love and blessings as he signs his name. The train arrives in Vancouver. The doors open up. The employees come to take off all of the dairy food, the cheese and the milk and the yogurts, etc., that were all there on the train. And lo and behold, they see there's a person there lying on the ground in a comatose state. And they immediately bring over the doctor. And the doctor starts checking this body. And it's obvious that the symptoms of this person are symptoms of somebody who's been frozen for 40 hours, hypothermia, and yet the doctor looks at everybody. He says, I don't understand what happened. The refrigerator was off. Those are the power of people's thoughts. And this is something you and I have to examine in our lives. And I'll explain to you why. Very often, we have a conversation going on in our mind for so many years, and we're so used to it, we don't even know that there is something unique or weird or strange about it. I may have this deep-seated trauma sitting in my body and in my brain, and it naturally is producing thoughts that are nonstop, and these thoughts are actually making my life miserable. They are telling me a story and a narrative that's not based on reality. It's based on my perception of reality, or it's based on certain experiences I had, or it's based on certain sensitivities I had. And these thoughts continuously speak to me in my brain, and they don't stop. And when my wife or my mother or my brother or my sister or my father or my employer or my employee or my friend or my neighbor or my child or my grandchild tells me something, their words are filtered through this chatter that my brain incessantly communicates. Chatter that the message of this chatter is one that is demoralizing and one that is essentially negative. And when I believe that I am stuck in a refrigerator, my symptoms will be such, even if in reality there is no basis for it. We so often do this to ourselves in our lives. This is what happened to the spies. They were overtaken by fear, and that became the story. And now reality confirmed that story. Their reality conformed to the story they were telling themselves in their minds about reality. I once read a fabulous story about a journalist who came to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe was encouraging this journalist, he was the editor of a newspaper, to write in the newspaper positive things about the Jewish people, to build confidence, to build hope, to build positive energy. And the Rebbe said to him that this is your role as an editor, not just to produce an interesting newspaper that will make money, but rather to infuse the newspaper with meaning, with a message of inspiration, one that will inspire people to become better, to bring light into the world. And this journalist responded to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and he said, no. I am dedicated to the two themes of journalism. I'm independent and I'm objective. Our newspaper will not be subjected to bribes of any form or fashion, not financial bribes and not religious bribes. We are independent. We are not dependent on a certain party, on a certain family, on a certain culture, on a certain institution that supports us. We are an independent newspaper. And we are completely objective. Completely objective. And the Rebbe said to him, independent, maybe. Objective? Objective, you're not. He said, I am. I am objective. And I will not take any sides. If there is criticism to be written, I will write criticism. If there is praise, I will write praise. If there's something ugly going on in our community, I will expose it. There's no censorship. I will remain objective. I will remain loyal to the truth. And the Rebbe looked at him and said, remember the objective truth. The human being who is objective has not been created yet. There is no human being who is objective. Every one of us has biases. You may be free from agendas, but you're not free from biases. What a profound line. Many of us have agendas, conscious agendas or unconscious agendas. But some of us don't always have agendas. Sometimes there are people who don't have agendas. Agendas maybe not, but biases you have. And how can I not? Does that not depend on my nature and on my nurture? Does it not depend on the home I grew up in, on the type of parents I had, on the type of teachers and educators I have, on the type of life experiences I had? There are people, everybody's vision of reality is filtered through their life's experiences, positive experiences and negative experiences. How, if you are a human being who's normal, who's sane, a human being who has emotions, a human being who experiences life, how can my perspective not be affected? How can I not have biases? I may try to be objective, but I am not, and I must become aware of those biases. And the first bias you have to be aware of is, does your mind gravitate towards negativity or towards positivity? Does your mind essentially gravitate towards a life philosophy that is negative, that is toxic? Now let's face it. There is what's called today intergenerational trauma. And they used to think that there are things that can be transferred through the genes. Those are the genetic. We are all the genetic ears. There's the hereditary. We're all genetic ears of the previous generations. But then there are those things that can't be transferred through genes. Today we know in epigenetics, trauma can also be transferred. The fears of my mother and my father and my grandparents could be transferred. They're intergenerational. So this is not about blame or judgment. It's about compassion and being aware to what is happening inside our psyche and asking myself, does my mind have a negativity bias or a positivity bias? In the name of a wonderful book that a colleague of mine, Rabbi Collinson, wrote about the Rebbe as somebody who introduced a positivity bias. And because of this, it is so critical to appreciate one of the great contributions of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe was born 1902 in the Ukraine. Ukraine then was a very difficult place for the Jewish people. There were massacres, there was pogroms. Tsarist Russia was anti-Semitic through and through. The culture of Russia was saturated with hatred to the Jewish people. The Rebbe has observed pogroms and observed tragic deaths. In his youth, he witnessed the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 when he was just a 15-year-old boy, and the horrible pogroms that followed and the civil wars. I don't know, most of you don't even know that close to 200,000, 100 to 200,000 Jews were murdered mercilessly during those years between 1917 and 1921 in Russia. Most people don't even know because between the First World War and the Second World War, these little events were eclipsed. But the suffering of the First World War, if not for the Second World War, the First World War was called the Great War. That suffering was tremendous. And the Rebbe was there in the vortex of it. Then, of course, he watched Trotsky, Lenin, Stalin abduct the Soviet Union and turn it into a living hell on earth, which brought suffering to millions and millions of people, and foremost among them the Jewish people, especially Jews who were committed to Judaism. His own father was arrested and sent to Stalin's Gulag in Kazakhstan, where he died in 1944. The Rebbe watched his own Rebbe be arrested and almost sentenced to death. Miraculously, he was liberated in 1927. And so many other loyal Jews and Hasidim were either shot or sent to the Gulag, where so many of them died. The Rebbe himself left the Soviet Union in 1927 and moved to Berlin, where in 1933 he watched Germany elect the Chancellor, Adolf Hitler, January 1933. The Rebbe left Germany and moved to Paris, and then was there when the Nazis occupied France, and escaped with his wife and arrived to the shores of the United States of America in June 1941, actually on the 28th day of Sivan 1941. The Rebbe himself never had children, and the Rebbe himself saw a generation of blood, violence, struggle, and strife. Probably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult generation of Jewish history. And that's why many people of the Rebbe's generation, even if they were men of faith, had a certain internal bitterness and negativity, and you can't blame them. They just saw too much pain. How then must one appreciate the incredible personality and inner work that the Rebbe did and taught of how to really consciously and unconsciously shift our bias from living in an environment internally that is negative, toxic, depressing, demoralizing, into an attitude which is optimistic, empowering, encouraging, inspirational. The Rebbe could not tolerate cynicism. He could not tolerate despair. He could not tolerate demoralization. And most of all, he could not tolerate people who did not believe in their own competence and ability to be able to live a meaningful life and bring light into their life. Not because he underestimated people's challenges, but because beneath all challenges, he would not stop believing the fundamental doctrine of Judaism, that each and every one of us is a divine ambassador of love, light, and hope, and therefore, at your core, you are invincible. You are indestructible. You are never ever a victim. You are an emissary sent right here, right now, to bring light into the darkness, my dearest friends. You know, I want to share with you an incredible story. I have shared the story in the past, and I listened to it again today to make sure that I had all the facts and details straight, because I wanted to share it this evening with all of you, my dearest friends. It's such an empowering story, and it's also so relevant to what is happening the last few weeks in the United States of America since that challenging day, May 25, 2020, when in Minneapolis, Minnesota, George Floyd was horrifically killed when a police officer held his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, causing the death of George Floyd and resulting in mass rioting all across the United States of America. And in such a climate, with all of the challenges that have emerged to the fore, this story is not just timely, but is paramount to inculcate in our psyches and to share it with the world. It's a lovely story, and it speaks so much to our theme this evening. The story is about, I believe, somebody who was the first, or one of the first, black congresswoman to serve in the Congress of our blessed country, the United States of America. Her name, Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm, an African-American woman, fiery speaker, a great advocate for civil rights and for the rights of our black brothers and sisters in the black community. And in the 1960s, she was at last elected as a congresswoman in the U.S. Congress. Now, Shirley Chisholm lived in Brooklyn. And when she won, it was a great victory for her. She was extremely excited and optimistic. She was an eloquent communicator, and she spoke much about her commitment and her duty and her privilege to be able to transform the climate in the United States, to be able to create an atmosphere and an ambiance of camaraderie, of civil rights, to uproot bigotry and prejudice and racism and so forth. Now, you'll forgive me, but some of the white Southern racists running the U.S. House of Representatives decided to teach Shirley Chisholm a lesson. And what was the lesson? They assigned her to the Agricultural Committee run by the U.S. House of Representatives. Oh, was this an insult? Here is a representative of Brooklyn, New York, placed in the position of the Agricultural Committee. The New York Times had a front page story. You know what the headline was? Is there even a tree that grows in Brooklyn? For those of you who know Brooklyn, Brooklyn is not the center of agriculture. Brooklyn is a place that you move if you want to hear 24 hours, the sirens of ambulances and the beeps of trucks. It's not the place of agriculture and of serenity and tranquility. You can come to my neck of the woods for that, or some of your locations. Does a tree grow in Brooklyn, the New York Times asked? And this was really, I think, a little bit of the revenge of these Southern racists in the U.S. House of Representatives who were trying to teach her a lesson. Now, she was hoping to be in the Committee for Poverty so she can get rid of poverty or civil relations, but they put her in she gets stuck in the Agricultural Committee. What is she supposed to do in the Agricultural Committee in Brooklyn? What type of agriculture is there in Brooklyn? You know, farms in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. You know how many farms there are? You know how many farms there are in Brooklyn? This is not Montana. This is not Wyoming. This is not Dakota. It's not California. She was very, very depressed. And she was very upset. This was for her such an insult and an expression of the lack of respect. And just for her, this was racism. Years later, when she retired from the House, she shared the story that happened. She gets a call one day that there is a rabbi, a Hasidic Rebbe who wants to see her. Who? Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the young Lubavitcher Rebbe, relatively young Lubavitcher Rebbe, living in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. Now, she has met the Rebbe once. She asked the Rebbe to endorse her. The Rebbe would not usually get involved in politics and endorse candidates, so the Rebbe politely blessed her and wished her well, but he refused to come out with an endorsement. Notwithstanding that, she won, and she won, I think, a lot of her victory was due to the support of many members of the Hasidic community. So she knew who the Rebbe was, and she knew that the Rebbe was the one who would not explicitly endorse her. But now, after she was already a Congresswoman, the Rebbe invites her a second time to his office. She shared this story publicly. This black woman comes into the office of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe greets her and welcomes her, and he says to her, "I know you are upset." And she says, "Yes, Rabbi. I am furious. I am very upset. I am hurt about what was done to me. Finally, a black woman wins. I thought I'd be put into the Committee of Poverty or another essential, indispensable committee. They put me on the Committee of Agriculture." And the Rebbe looks at her and he says, "I really see it very differently. Don't you realize the great gift that God has given you in your present position, and the gift that these people have given you to be able to give you such a powerful voice connected to agriculture?" She says, "What type of gift is this? This is a losing proposition. This was their revenge so that I should be able to achieve nothing and accomplish nothing, and my years of service will prove to be futile. I'm from Brooklyn." And the Rebbe said, "Do you know what a great surplus of food there is in the United States of America? Do you know how many hungry people there are? Why don't you seize the moment and use your position to be able to allocate the surplus of food to all those women and men and children who are hungry in the black community and in other communities? This is a divine gift, Miss Chisholm, which the Creator of the world has given you, to be able to feed hungry people and give them life, health, and dignity." Strange words. How was she supposed to feed hungry people? She thanked the Rebbe and she left the room. She continued the story. During her first day in Washington, she meets a man who was then a very young congressman, later would become quite famous, Robert Dole from Kansas. And they start schmoozing. They start talking. And Robert Dole says to Shirley Chisholm, he says, do you know our farmers have so much extra food and I do not know what to do with it? And the light bulb goes off in her brain and she remembers that just a little while ago she was by the rabbi, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he told her what to do with it. And you know what happened that day? The program we know today as food stamps has been developed and expanded to a point where so many hungry, black and white children and mothers and fathers, women and men and children and infants have been sustained by this wiki and food stamp program. And she looked at the people and she said, I want you to know, at a moment when I was depressed, there was a rabbi who taught me how to be optimistic. And I want you also to know that if poor black babies today have milk to drink and bread to eat, it's because a rabbi in Crown Heights had vision. This is how the Rebbe thought. It's how the Rebbe taught people to think. Every obstacle is a challenge and every challenge is an opportunity. Every winding path and road in your life, every twist in your life is not a catalyst for despair, but an opportunity for growth, for awareness, for transformation, for healing. Here was a woman who felt duped. She felt that the white Southern racists have taken their ultimate revenge on her. She was elected to the Congress, but now she has nothing to do with her job as part of the Agricultural Committee. And the Rebbe said, no, you are a divine ambassador. You're not a victim. Can you seize the historic opportunity? And through your influence and vision, you can accomplish things that you would never be able to accomplish on another committee. You're not just going to make small incremental changes. You will actually give life and health and food and water and milk and nutrition to hundreds, to thousands, to millions of people who are struggling to be able to put food on their table. Because by the Rebbe, the vocabulary of victimhood and wallowing in self-pity did not exist, not because he did not have compassion. He had a lot of compassion. But his compassion always was focused on the idea that I love you too much to believe that you are essentially a random error and an inconsequential mutation, a blimp on the surface of infinity. You are much more powerful than that. You are indispensable to the divine plan of creation. Tune into it and seize the moment. My dearest friends, I mentioned earlier Elie Wiesel, who was a personal friend of my father and of my family. They worked together in journalism for many, many years. Wiesel lost much of his family during the Holocaust. He was in Auschwitz, he was in Buchenwald. And I mentioned before how he came to the Rebbe in the early 60s. I actually heard from him at the 30th day anniversary of my father's passing in 2005. He came to speak in Parkey's synagogue, Rabbi Schneier's synagogue in Manhattan. And he said that he was a journalist at the time. And my late father suggested that he come meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said that was a turning point in his life. The Rebbe convinced him to get married. Elie Wiesel didn't want to get married. He felt it was irresponsible for a Jew to perpetuate a Jewish family. He didn't want to get married. He didn't want to have Jewish children. The Rebbe convinced him to marry his wife, Marion, may she be well, and to have a baby. His oldest son, his one and only son, Elisha, who he named after his father, who was murdered during the Holocaust. They were together and his father died, and he named his son Elisha. His son was born a few days before me, 1972. Elie Wiesel said, your father came to my son's bris and I came to your bris. And so Elie Wiesel was once by the Rebbe. So he shared. And the Rebbe turned to him and said, Eliezer was his name, Eliezer, what can I give you? What can I do for you? I want to share something with you. I want to give you something. Ask for something. This is a rare opportunity. The great Lubavitcher Rebbe is asking what you would like. And Elie Wiesel asked for something extraordinary. And those of you who had parents who were Holocaust survivors, or grandparents, or friends, or you yourself, will be able to really understand this story. Elie Wiesel says, Lubavitcher Rebbe, I'm going to ask you to teach me how to cry again. Because for many survivors, the faucet responsible for tears was shut down. Because, as a Jew once told me, if we would start crying, we would never stop. So in order not to cry, we had to shut off that faucet. You have to shut off the switch. The problem is, when you shut off the switch of one emotion, you shut off the switch of all other emotions. When I don't know how to cry, do I know how to emote in other ways? But the pain, the trauma, the suffering was so profound, he could not cry. So he says, Lubavitcher Rebbe, you want to do something for me? Teach me once again how to cry. I want to be able to cry. And in the most compassionate eyes, the Rebbe looked at Professor Elie Wiesel, and he said, I would love to teach you how to cry, but that's not enough. That's not enough. I want to be able to teach you how to laugh. I want to be able to teach you how to sing. I want to be able to teach you how to dance. That's what I want to do. And that the Rebbe did in his own inimitable way. He taught Elie Wiesel how to cry. He taught him how to sing. And he taught him how to dance. It's something the Rebbe taught hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Jews. The Rebbe cried a lot. I've seen the Rebbe weep a lot. The Rebbe would speak publicly, and suddenly he can burst out sobbing like a baby. It was fascinating. I remember one Simchas Torah. The Rebbe was in his 80s, 1986. The Rebbe was 84, 85. And he was speaking about Moshe breaking the tablets. And he started to cry. Maybe a half an hour he was weeping and sobbing. There was no self-consciousness. The Rebbe cried. He cried a lot. But how he sung and how he danced, and he taught people to dance, was an incredible, incredible source of empowerment. So my dearest friends, on this special night, I bless you and pray together with all of you that we should learn how to cry. More importantly, we should all learn how to laugh, how to sing, and how to dance. Thank you very, very much. Okay, the questions are coming in, so let me address the first question. The first question is as follows. Rabbi, so do we have a shlichus at the various news media outlets? Do we have a mission to do at the various news media outlets? Listen, every single one of us has influence, and those who have influence in the news media, it behooves them to maximize that influence because, as you know, media always, and especially today, has a tremendous power. It impacts the youth, it impacts the elderly, it can indoctrinate people with blood libels, and it can also teach people of tolerance and love and truth. And to quote the legendary Senator Monian, who said, "You're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts." Nonetheless, we see today that many journalists and academics and professors and politicians believe that they are entitled to their own facts, and they spew lies, and they spew venom, and they spew hate, and they spew anti-Semitism, and that's why anyone who has the ability to influence media outlets or has their own media outlets, I believe it behooves each and every one of us to do whatever we can to combat falsehood, to combat prejudice in any way it's manifested, and to speak truth to power. Next question. Yes, somebody asks if we can wish their father a happy 92nd birthday. Absolutely. So I want to wish your father, Stephen's father, Mutilpa ben Siskind Halevi. Mutilpa ben Siskind Halevi, a happy 92nd birthday. Wow. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, Yom Holedet Sameach, Yom Holedet Sameach. May you enjoy many, many more happy and healthy years. May the first 92 years of your life pale in comparison to the joy and enthusiasm and good news that you will be able to have and share with us in the following years. Now you may be wondering, am I crazy? But soon Mashiach will come and the lifespan will be expanded even more. And even till Mashiach comes, may you enjoy many long, happy, healthy, and prosperous years. How has the food stamp program improved since the days of Shirley Chisholm? It is time to do anything more now to make the system better for the United States of America. Thank you, Dave. Frankly, I am not intimately or even not intimately familiar with the food stamp program, so I'm really unaware. But I do know about this story of Shirley Chisholm, and I was always very inspired by the fact that the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn was one of the key figures responsible for feeding so many people poverty-struck in the United States of America, in the white community, and of course as well in all communities, the black community, the white community, etc. What is the best advice for time management, since it's so important to prioritize and complete what is important in life? Very good question. Very good question. And the answer to that is, this is not a lesson on time management, but I'll just maybe share one or two very important ideas about time management. The first thing when it comes to time management is you have to define to yourself what are your real priorities in life. And then you dedicate time each day to those priorities. For example, prayer, study, acts of charity, meditation, exercise, spending time with your loved ones. These are real priorities in life, or other priorities that every single person has in terms of your mission. Prioritize what are your real key priorities in life, and then create a schedule that prioritizes those things. That is number one. And another important thing in time management is that when you're doing something, be completely present. Don't do it haphazardly. When you're doing something, do it fully. Sometimes we do things, but we're not really interested, so we're not fully there. When you're doing something, be fully present to the best of your ability. Sometimes when you're not in the mood of something and you don't have the motivation to do it, don't start doing it haphazard, because you're going to have to come back to it. You have to really figure it out in yourself. If I'm ready to do this, if this is the right thing, let me do it fully. Put in your mind there, put in your heart there. This has been affirming and inspiring. Which psalm or prayer do you think quintessentially speaks to this sense of everyone being personally guided so that everything is always for the best? It's a great question. I find this very much in Psalm chapter 139. Psalm chapter 139. I mean, the truth is, so many psalms speak to this theme. The book of Psalms is an indispensable companion for people, especially now during this pandemic. The book of Psalms I find as an indispensable companion. Particularly, I always appreciate very much chapter 139, where King David says, Im Issac shamayim shamata. If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I go down to the abyss, if I lay down in the abyss, you're there too. Even if I cross the sea and I go to the other side of the world, there too, your right arm will hold on to me and you will be there at my side. Gam choshech lo yachshik mimeka. Even darkness cannot eclipse your presence. And night will shine like day, because for you darkness is like light. This is one psalm, its theme, I think, speaks very much to the ideas that we tried to address. What is the concept of Mashiach and the connection to the Rebbe? Very good question. You may know that the Rebbe very often spoke about the coming of Mashiach and the need for the Jewish people to prepare themselves for Geula, for redemption. Now, we all know, as the Rebbe himself would emphasize very often, nobody knows when Mashiach will come. God is the one who chooses and decides when Mashiach will come. We prepare ourselves and we hope and we pray and we ask for Mashiach to come. But there is one very powerful idea that the Rebbe used to speak about that I want to share with you. And that is, the Rebbe said that we live today in a time where you could sense the energy of redemption in the air, and each of us is capable of living a life which reflects the state of the world when Mashiach will be here. When Mashiach will come, the world will be a unified, harmonious reality. The divine presence in every person and in every reality will be revealed. We could start living like that today. I can choose today to live in a consciousness of redemption, meaning to live mentally in a space where I experience myself and everybody else as always one with God, as a reflection of infinity in this world. So that way, today I can already live in a consciousness of redemption. To what extent should Chabad rabbis reach out to the non-Jewish community? It's a wonderful, wonderful question. Now, it's very hard to give a specific answer to this because every Chabad rabbi and Rebbitzin have their hands full with a lot. First of all, many of you don't realize they have their own families, very often large families, and that itself is work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, especially now. But even before Corona, between the education, psychological needs, earning a livelihood, taking care of your kids, each of them, whom I know, many of them I know, have their hands really full. Besides that, there is the responsibility for the Jewish community, all the programs, the education, the schools they have, the synagogues they have, the mikvahs they have, the camps they have, the preschools they have, the classes they have, the seminars, the programs, social programs, religious programs, holiday programs. So each and every one of them has their hands full. But I really believe that every one of us, not just the Chabad rabbis, maybe even more the rest of us, and the Chabad rabbis, all have a tremendous opportunity today to become those people about whom Prophet Isaiah speaks when he says that the Jewish people are supposed to be Or LaGoyim, a light unto the nations. Maimonides writes that we were given at Sinai a mandate not just to influence the Jewish world, but to ultimately influence the entire Gentile world, to impact all of humanity, all 7.7 billion people living on the face of this planet, to live up to the 7 Noahide laws, which means to live in a world saturated with goodness and kindness, a world dedicated to morality and moral values. I mean, just look at recent incidents. The fact is, how can a white police officer, even if he's angry, and even if he is summoned into a very difficult situation, have his knee on the neck of a person for 8 minutes and 46 seconds when people around were protesting? And no, I am not going to be politically correct and tell you that George Floyd was a saint. He was not a saint. Unfortunately, he was a criminal. But nobody deserves such injustice and such treatment. How does a police officer behave this way? I ask you a question. And now I have another question. People who are looting and beating and stealing and destroying the property of innocent people, including innocent blacks who did nothing to deserve this. How do people behave in such a way? And the answer is education, education, education. When children are not educated with the values of absolute morality, that God expects of you to be decent, to be kind, to be giving, God expects of you to curtail your temper, your anger, your addictions, and your cravings, and behave according to the moral instructions of what is good and what is not good. When we fail to teach this to our children, it results in a country that loses its moral compass. And this is, I believe, where the Jewish people have to play such an indispensable role, to reach out to all of our non-Jewish brothers and sisters, blacks and whites, people of all races and all persuasions and all ethnic groups, and say, we're living here in the world together. We're not victims. We must be here for each other. And together we must build a world of goodness and kindness. This is the most important value we need to teach all of our children, all of our youth. And I believe all of us, Chabad rabbis, Chabad Rebbetzins, laymen, lay leaders, lay women of all stripes, have this duty and privilege to use their influence to impact humanity in every conceivable way. To realize that our most important responsibility for ourselves and for our future is to dedicate our lives to the mission God entrusted to each and every human being, which is to build a world that is based on civilization and the morals of goodness and kindness to other people. Next question. I tuned in all the way from Toronto, Canada. We're ready for you to visit Toronto and give the special lecture to the Canadians. Thank you. It was a pleasure getting to know you. Okay, I bless you. Okay, thank you very much for your kind words. How can we bring the values of dignity and growth and light to help influence the necessary reforms in law enforcement and in politics? I believe it all begins with education, and it all begins with information, and it all begins with inspiration. Each and every one of us must be an educator, a pedagogue, and an ambassador of wisdom and of truth and inspiration. Whether you use your influence, everyone has influence. You have friends, you have family, you have community, you have a website, you have a blog, you have a company, you have an organization, you have a corporation. Learn from the coronavirus. Learn from the coronavirus. A man sneezes in Wuhan, China, and the whole world is changed. Somebody touches a doorknob in Milan, Italy, and all 7.7 billion people are affected. Because nobody is too small to make a difference, and nobody is too insignificant to have an impact. Look what happened with the coronavirus. One man sneezes in the other end of the world, and all of us are in quarantine because of one sneeze. Never underestimate the power of a mitzvah. Never underestimate your influence, and never underestimate how we are all interconnected, and we are all integrated. We all inhale the same oxygen. We all live on the same planet, and we're all vulnerable, and therefore we are responsible to each other. This is the critical message of our time. What emotions of the heart can make us positive and happy? Emotions of the heart that can make us positive and happy are those emotions that tell us that within every experience there is an opportunity for growth and awareness. When you can develop that perspective, that in every encounter, in every moment, in every experience, there is a hidden opportunity or a revealed opportunity for deeper awareness, for deeper growth, for deeper transformation. This doesn't change the circumstances, but it alters perspective. It doesn't take away the pain. You have to respect the pain. You have to respect that space, but don't fight with the space. That's the main idea we spoke about. Respect the space you're in and realize this is it. And don't fight with it. Don't try to battle it. Look at it. If you have to cry, cry. But then also as you cry, when you look deeper, you'll also be able to find laughter there.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson. We have to let him go on to his next appointment. We appreciate it very, very much. A special thank you to all the 15 Chabad centers on Florida Gulf Coast who joined us tonight and putting this wonderful program together. We thank all our sponsors. If you have not yet sponsored, please contact your local Chabad center to do so. And as we prepare for the Rebbe's yartzeit, which is next Wednesday night and Thursday, please take a moment to log on to www.therebbe.org to learn more about the Rebbe and do a mitzvah in his memory. Again, thank you so much and have a good evening.
I want to seize the opportunity to thank all of the Chabad centers who have brought us here together for this special evening. And I also would like to specially encourage each and every one of you to take this evening of unity and take something home with you, quote unquote, back to your life. Try to think about one extra mitzvah, good deed, Jewish deed that you can increase in your life, beginning with today and tomorrow, that will bring more positivity, more meaning, more joy into your life, into your home, and into the world. It may be the mitzvah of prayer, the mitzvah of tefillin, the mitzvah of studying Torah, the mitzvah of celebrating Shabbat, lighting Shabbos candles, the mitzvah of charity, the mitzvah of reaching out to a fellow human being or a fellow Jew through the telephone or through a text message and encouraging them. There are 600 mitzvahs you could choose from, and each and every one of us, I think, would really do something tremendous for ourselves and for the world and for God and for the Rebbe and for history if we can take upon ourselves one very special good deed and mitzvah to be able to introduce this into our homes and into our lives. Thank you. I love you. Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. Good night.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.